I almost don't want to break it up because, wow, do we need some laughter and joy, right? Woo. Yeah, yeah. Welcome and good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Yeah, I feel like you can kind of track the news cycle by how many people show up here. So I'm so glad you're all here. And yeah, so glad we can kind of like be with each other and this world in the way that we are being asked to show up, right? And by coming here, here we are with this not most, but one of our most ancient technologies, these teachings. So this 8th century text by Shanti Deva with commentary by Pema Chödrön that makes it relevant for today. And happily, the part of the text that we're covering tonight is on joy. And we've been looking at this experience of joyful enthusiasm on our path. And it's sometimes considered like the wind in the sails of our path. We have to have this joyful enthusiasm or else we'll never make it, right? No matter how great our aspiration for compassion is, no matter how much we want to see clearly into our own habitual patterns of mind that get in the way, without that joyful enthusiasm, we're going to burn out. We're going to get distracted. We're going to fall into the 3 kinds of laziness that are described. So it's wonderful to be together and focusing on kind of bringing that energy of joyful enthusiasm. And tonight, specifically, it's actually this aspect of joyful pride. We have a not great connotation with that word pride, for good reason. It often has an association with arrogance, which we see the extremely destructive potentials of when in places of power, right? Okay. So what is joyful pride, right? What could there be an understanding that allows our pride to feel kind of wholesome and supportive? And the joyful pride, it comes from this clear seeing, a clear feeling, and a clear knowing of our fundamental and basic goodness. A clear seeing, a clear feeling, and a clear knowing of our fundamental basic goodness. Does that sound edgy to anybody here? But also maybe like a relief, right? It's that not, wow, I got this done today, so I am deserving of a sense of pride and accomplishment. Or I have not succumbed to this, that, or the other today, so okay, like I should have some sense of pride. And both of those could be quite wholesome, right? We could dedicate ourselves to, I vow to open my news app only once today. And when I do so, doing so with an intention of compassion. That's wonderful, but that's a kind of satisfaction and pride out of our action and behavior. Action and behavior coming from a good motivation. But in this kind of joyful pride, we're really going to just the ground floor. I feel pride in knowing and connecting to my basic goodness. And basic goodness is a term that's kind of like hedging a little, because for some people saying your intrinsic Buddha nature might feel like too much. But this idea that we are always already good, okay, radiant, actually, that our natural being has all of the radiances of the 4 immeasurables. We already emanate loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. And sometimes things get in the way of that. When we're tired and grumpy, when we're stressed, when, very real life circumstances arise that make the world feel unfriendly, unfair, difficult. Sometimes it can block that sense of already okay, already good. So tonight in practice, we're going to connect to our basic goodness. And this isn't again, this isn't always the easiest for people, so I want to prime the pump a bit. When we say connecting to basic goodness, for some of us in the room, maybe we already can kind of lean back into that feeling or into that knowing. But for others, it might feel a little more elusive or vague, like, what would that feel like? What could that be? So I'd love to kind of have a little conversation or a little reflection on that. I can give a simple example of connecting to a sense of basic goodness is, a moment in which, yesterday preparing for our class, I remembered that I'm not just reading and writing notes, I am actually living my Dharma, right? And just was able to stop doing anything and just be with the moment of feeling like there's nothing wrong right now. There's nowhere I need to be, there's nothing I need to do, it's okay. And even that like brief click in, like that is connecting with our basic goodness. Sometimes we see it or feel it in the face of seeing, or looking at the world and recognizing the goodness that's all around us. That can kind of highlight that for us. So I'd be curious from folks here, is there a time that you can remember or recall in connecting with basic goodness? And before we do so, will you raise your hand if there's an open seat next to you? There's some back there. Go on in, Kate. Yeah, welcome. So nice to see some first timers. Welcome, y'all. It's great to have you. So yeah, anyone here have a palpable sense, memory of connecting to something that feels like basic goodness? When has that happened? What does it feel like? And I think we have a mic somewhere. Oh, wow. And the mic isn't amplified, it's just so folks at home can hear. So anybody have a sense of that they're willing to share? When have you experienced basic goodness, knowing you're always already okay? Yeah, Drew, thank you.
I feel my inner basic goodness, I think, when my dog just looks at me. Just sitting there and having him perceive me just as me, and he just loves me for who I am, and not because I did anything that day, but just because I'm there and being my full self and giving him attention and love. And so I think being seen by an animal that just understands you deeply, but like helps me feel my own inner greatness.
I love that. We really should suggest to Shanti Deva to put that in, because it's true though, right? There's that simple, reflection of being loving and loved. Yeah, without any, like not judging whether the room is clean or not, right? Not judging what we got done. I love that. And then in the body, is there like a sense you have with that? Is it?
Yeah, just I think it's sense of peace. Just I don't need to do anything. I'm worthy just how I am, and sitting here, I just feel at rest and not like I need to go run and do a bunch of things.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Anybody else?
Just walking down the street and there was some sunshine and there was a breeze. That's it.
Yeah.
It was just a moment.
Yeah.
I was in the shade.
Yeah.
And then I was not in the shade.
Yeah.
And it was just warm.
Yep. And I can see it in your face, but for friends at home who can't, like, what's the felt sense?
I just remember my mind going blank and just being like, I'm a complicated plant. This is nice. And then I was crossing the street, and I was like, I had to finish crossing the street, so there's cars.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was real nice.
That's so beautiful. And you kind of touch on something that might sound a little complicated, but is really quite simple, is our basic goodness can help us connect to the groundlessness of our being. Because in our basic goodness, we're an unelaborated sense of being. We are did you say complicated plant, right? We are a reflection of, right, this world, and it is a reflection of us. And happily, those subject-object boundaries can feel more porous. So even just that simple moment of connecting to the fundamental nature of what's already good in us, we get the added benefit of tasting something like emptiness. So, yeah.
I hope this answers a question, but so I see how some very public, very big mistakes are made that I would be mortified if they were mine. And so then I look at myself and be like, maybe I'm making a big deal out of my things. Like maybe that's way too big. Maybe everything's just fine.
Beautiful. That's you're kind of having some prescience for, there's one passage tonight I love, which is connecting with no big deal me. You know, like no big deal, like okay, right? So I think there's a real quality, I think the sense of our own basic goodness allows us to have an identity that isn't quite so precious and tight. And so that feeling of like, oh yeah, maybe I'm doing okay, right? I was chatting with Drew tonight before we came here about, you know, in this last year for me, there's been a constant refrain. I think it's a kind of a wisdom wind coming through of how much is enough, right? How much do I need to be? How much do I need to do? How much do I need to earn? How much do I need to have? And those kinds of questions that, you know, they kind of can pierce through our momentum of more, next, out there. So that's a beautiful kind of insight to have of, yeah, maybe I'm already okay. Maybe this is okay. Yeah, wonderful. Maybe one more. Anybody else? A sense? Yeah, Sarana.
It feels like a little candle in my heart.
Beautiful. Yes. Yeah. And that, you know, that sense that it's always there, right? It's always lit. And, you know, sometimes when we return to our basic goodness, there can actually be a little bit of like this poignant longing, this ache, because we've been away from it or we've forgotten. And so to also like look towards the sweetness of when we return to it, you know, that it's okay. Like we can fall away again and again, and it doesn't mean that we've done anything wrong or bad, but that sometimes again, that candle flame is so different than maybe like big, bright bleacher lights of this world is on fire, or I'm so anxious, or, you know, there's different kind of volumes in terms of what we can attend to. And coming back to that candlelight kind of requires a little bit of stillness, a little bit of presence, and yeah. And there's something so beautiful about that image because it's so delicate, the candlelight, you know. I don't know if any of you have had the experience of being outside, lighting some candles on a birthday cake and trying to like walk it over to someone, and you're like, oh God, protect it from everything. And we really have to actually protect and make space for that basic goodness. We don't need to generate it, but we have to create that protective space around it. Beautiful. Anyone have a question? Yes, please. Is it Coco or is it you?
I think that's Coco.
Okay.
Okay, start, you start. Now I don't remember. Let me see. For me, basic goodness could be, I have 2 trees outside my house, and one is not mine, and the other one is mine. And I put water in the 2 of them.
Yeah.
And then my neighbor, she's not nice at all. And like she started being more and more mean because she already doesn't live there. She has her furniture and all of that, but she left. So she became who she was, I think so. And I said, I'm gonna keep on wedding her tree.
Yeah,
Her
beautiful.
tree and my tree.
Yeah.
Because the two trees are not mine, not hers.
Yeah, good.
It's from the world
Yeah.
around us.
Beautiful. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. So that's again, there's that sense of basic goodness, and then we can also see what arises from it, which is that interdependence, right? That non-separateness. Beautiful. So do folks have, yes, Noam?
I'm not sure how to, if this will be understandable, but there's a simplicity to basic goodness. Like sometimes when I'm all worked up about something, the way to get unworked up is to drop all the complications and just come back to the simplicity.
Yeah.
There's a simplicity in goodness.
Yeah.
So that suggests that it's my inherent nature.
Yeah.
Because everything else is complications.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I love that. And simplicity, it was my New Year's resolution for 6 years before I managed to actually prioritize it in my life. So I think there's this yearning again, this longing towards that which brings us closer to our true nature, to our basic goodness. And about, I think 3 weeks ago, we did a class on longing and devotion and what it means to kind of bring our whole heart, mind, and body towards the practice. And when we identify what it feels like to have even a moment's rest in basic goodness, of course we want to prioritize it. Of course we want to make space for it. So we kind of need to continually reconnect with it so that we don't forget that. And like we have a wholesome longing and a wholesome desire. Yeah, and I think I'll just say, because I always want to bring forth the skeptic or the other point of view, that many people, maybe not in this room, maybe some of you in this room are like, yeah, basic goodness, but then why does the world look the way it looks? If we all have this intrinsic goodness, then why is this world the way it is? And though there is that kind of candlelight potential, it's not a guarantee that we have access to it. We have to work for it. And, if you look at these, beautiful studies that are done early in life with toddlers and, their natural behavior, like there's this real interest in child development, that whole field of psychology, which I think is one of the most fascinating fields because you really see, moment by moment what comes online in terms of empathy and emotions and other experiences for kids. And you do these early studies and these toddlers, they're so eager to help. The experimenter comes in and pretends to drop everything on the floor and little toddlers rush around and they're like, help you. It's so adorable. And you're like, oh, there's a basic caring for others' well-being, a basic altruistic behavior. But if anyone's been around a toddler recently, yeah, you take away something they want, oh my God, that tantrum is next level, right? It's atomic, right? And so we have both potentials within us, right, of these natural arisings of difficult emotions that when we get stuck on them, obscure our clear seeing, obscure the fact that we are both trees, that of course we water both trees. And so when we're tending to the basic goodness, it's not because we ignore, avoid, or deny that these other difficulties are also there or part of who we are, but we're kind of, deciding where we want to land, deciding where we want to have our fundamental ground. So what do you think? Should we try to find our way there? Sounds pretty, or I can bring up the news and read. So let's take a moment and find a posture. And I will say, for folks who are new, I'm Eve, by the way, welcome. And this evening, this Well of Being evening and community is a place where we really want folks to feel welcome, at ease, and comforted. We are really fortunate to have Jimmy at the door, so you can feel at ease that even if people are coming in late, no problem, you are safe and protected here. We have the back door open because it's a little stuffy, so if you hear noises from there, no problem. And if it's your first time here, maybe just orienting to the room. So like looking around, noticing the space and shape of this room in a non-creepy way, looking around at each other. Your Sangha for tonight. How beautiful. This group has never been together like this before. And I said it at the top, but we really need each other. And each person who's here in person and online is such a generous act to be here. And so I really appreciate and feel a lot of respect and gratitude for your practice and your presence. Each one of us here really matters. So letting that kind of field of the generosity of our presence help us come into practice. And so finding a posture that feels supportive. So these qualities of posture that support our practice is balance of uprightness and vividness alongside ease, relaxation. And so finding an uprightness and a vividness through the spine. And we want that uprightness to also have a sense of gentleness and suppleness. So not so straight that we're contracting in any way, but that uplifted sense of almost as though our spine were like the long stalk of a lily and our head resting on top of it like a beautifully blossoming flower. And feeling the strength of the uprightness of our spine. Inviting a quality of softness and gentleness between the brows, around the eyes, cheekbones and jaw. And as we turn inward, especially at this hour of the day, it can be easy to succumb to a bit of just fuzzy, tired feelings. So as much as possible, even though we are being gentle and kind, see if we can find a precise attention. So bringing our attention and awareness with this clarity and precision into the sensations of the body. So breathing in and feeling, sensing, and knowing sensations in the body. Breathing out, just continuing this knowing and feeling and sensing sensations in the body. Feeling the preciousness of this transition moment from attending to the outer experience to deeply cultivating stability and care for the inner experience. Imagining this for the very first time, we were paying attention to sensations in the body. Like an intrepid explorer, finding all these territories, these different areas, different textures. So bringing our full attention and awareness to sensations throughout the body. And of course, there are still thoughts and memories and images. But again and again, we can give ourselves this opportunity to simply relax and release, and then return refreshed to this full, high saturation experience of attending to the sensations in the body. And as we notice these sensations in the body, of course, there's movement and subtle shifts. But can we connect to the overall experience of settling the body and into a natural state of stillness? This moment, nowhere else we need to be, nothing else we need to do. And supported by Sangha and community, we're invited to really settle into this body, into the state of stillness like the mountain. And then to support the further settling, we focus on the breath. Breathing in, really feel, sense, and know that we are breathing in. Breathing out, continue that feeling, sensing, and knowing of the breath as we breathe out. We're not imagining the breath. We're not trying to think about the breath. We're feeling the breath as though the breath is breathing us, and inviting even more so the inner speech to settle, to find a quality of natural silence as we follow the breath. When the mind gets carried away, how kindly, how gently can you relax and release and return, coming back to feeling the breath and sensing the breath and knowing the breath. And each breath revealing itself, maybe slightly longer, shorter, deeper, without any expectation, and if possible, without any preference for how the breath should be, just receiving each breath. Consider the possibility there's no wrong way to do this practice. If we succumb to dullness and find ourselves in a state of sleepiness, no problem. Find the wakefulness of recognizing that and returning to the breath, refreshed, renewed, and strengthening that capacity for noticing when we've fallen away. And just the same, if the mind feels wild with thoughts, ruminations, preoccupations, whether important or irrelevant, every time we notice we've been carried away, we have this beautiful opportunity for return and reunion with the breath. And to further support our connection with the breath, let's do a little practice of counting. So at the very top of the inhale, before the exhale, silently to ourselves, we begin the count at 1. And then we continue following the breath through the exhale and inhale, and then count 2. And doing it this way all the way to 11. When we notice that we actually are caught up once again in some distraction, we restart over, seeing if we can do so with joyful enthusiasm, the opportunity once again to steady the mind, establish attention, and come back over and over, deliberately placing the attention. And so doing a practice now of counting up to 11, primary focus on attending to the breath, but using each number as a small anchor to keep us here. Even if you only make it to 3, how wonderful. Returning over and over, and developing this core stability of mind. So just a bit longer here with the counting, tethering our mind with mindfulness to the present moment, breath by breath. With some sense of settling the body into this natural state of stillness, to our inner speech, more connected with silence, this presence with the breath. We now invite our mind to settle in a natural state of warmth and openness. We could feel or imagine this as a sense of leaning back in the mind, allowing our focus no longer to be so single-pointed, and instead more of an open, spacious awareness. feeling a sense of awareness that exists within the body and the sensations of the body. And a sense of awareness that extends beyond the periphery and perimeters of the body. A sense of the awareness in front of us and behind us, on either side of us. Awareness extending above and below. Awareness that permeates the space between thoughts that arise. It permeates even the sounds that we hear. So continually leaning back, leaning back. Whatever phenomena arises, thoughts, sensations, tastes, smells, inner sights, allowing them to simply arise and pass away like waves emerging from the great vast ocean of our awareness. Softening, brightening, opening. Natural state of mind. Unbounded and open. Of course, again, we can get carried away. See if you can notice the difference between the spacious openness, finding this natural state of mind, and the narrowness, the contractedness when a thought captures us. And then just play with that flexibility of reopening, releasing whatever has captured our attention and awareness, coming back to that more open, spacious sense, that feeling, that connecting to the natural ground. Whatever quality of openness or spaciousness you may feel, take a moment and notice, observing this natural state of mind. Is there some quality here that feels warm? Maybe even a quality of that spark or candle of kindness within us. Is there some way to connect to that feeling that there is something that is always already good shining through right here. We don't need to force this. If it doesn't feel present, no problem. But taking a moment and turning our attention and awareness onto itself is the state of our open, spacious awareness, also a state of warmth. Is our awareness itself infused with love? Not an active, directed love towards something, just a sense of latent, intrinsic care, kindness. If we feel some resonance or sense of that care and kindness, allowing it to be part of this openness and spaciousness, feeling that openness and spaciousness permeated by warmth, presence. If it's hard to connect to that sense of basic goodness here and now, maybe we could bring to mind a time in which we did feel connected to our basic goodness. That sense of peace, that sense of calm, that sense of light and warmth, unelaborated, just right here. Feel or imagine the sense of our basic goodness as a fundamental light. This light that we get to be almost as though a lantern, illuminating, radiating. Feeling this body, heart, and mind suffused with this potential light and goodness. Feel, sense, and imagine not only the potential radiance of our light, but the connection, sense of the lights that are all around us. Feeling the simple goodness of knowing our own goodness, knowing the goodness of the beings all around us. This connection to goodness, we allow it to open the heart, to help us feel bodhicitta, that beautiful inspiration to awaken this inner goodness for the sake of all beings. And we offer this practice. May any resonance of my own light, may any connection to my own goodness be dedicated and directed towards all beings everywhere, knowing their goodness. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for your goodness. So for folks who are new and not new, just a reminder that here at the Dharma Collective, we have this beautiful opportunity to be in community with one another. And it's also a sacred responsibility to one another. So we get to practice the kind of community we'd like to see in the world. And that's one in which we're really embodying compassion. Compassion in how we listen, and compassion in how we share with one another. Compassion even in our thoughts, in the ways that our mind is inclining. And so when we hear folks share, really engaging this compassionate attention, and if it is us who is sharing, really sharing from that place of compassion and consideration for one another. How does that sound? Can we do it? Joyful enthusiasm? Hell yeah! So wonderful. Yeah. I'd love to hear any questions or reflections on that practice. Yes, Ron. Oh, online. Madeline. We believe in you. You can unmute. Come on now.
Sorry, there's some technical difficulty that's
You got
causing it.
this. You got this.
I'm
can hear you.
unmuted. Can you hear me now? Yeah, sorry, there was some technical difficulty and it was saying, no, we're not going to unmute you. Maybe it's maybe it's reflecting my uncertainty about speaking, which is that I'm afraid I'm not sure I know what basic goodness is as
Good.
differentiated from the identity of being a good person.
Yeah.
And when I heard the two examples, I got confused about watering a tree, even though the lady who owned the tree was mean. And then the tree story evolved into that the person telling the story was connecting to something bigger. So I think I got it then. But then there was the story of the toddler who picked up the papers of the person running the experiment. And then I got confused again. Are acts of goodness basic goodness? Or is basic goodness something deeper or different-er?
Beautiful. What's your hit? What's your intuition?
I don't know. I struggle with the word goodness, honestly. I don't know. It
Yeah.
has an inherent quality of goodness, which makes it polarized to badness. And I think I don't really know. I struggle with that phrase. If it was something like life energy, or I don't know what, but something about basic goodness feels inherently dualistic to me and the
I love
opposite
it.
of badness. So yeah, just clarify. I don't think I have a hit. That's why I'm asking.
Great. I love your precisioning mind. So the example of the toddlers is a little bit of the way that contemporary psychology understands our potential for goodness, not as something that's learned or earned, but if we are good, then our behaviors often reflect that goodness. And so I think one part of your question is our goodness just something fundamental or a way that we are? And it is both. Except that so often we get preoccupied with our sense of goodness around what we do as opposed to who we are. So establishing that sense of our goodness as fundamental and then our actions as a kind of manifestation of it, but not required to be good. So that's
Okay.
one. And then the second, which I think you highlighted beautifully, is well, if there's basic goodness, is there basic badness? Right? And in, Vajrayana, and especially in the Dzogchen lineage, there's no bad. There's no poison, there's no, difficulty. And one thing I love about this text is a bodhisattva is so dedicated to waking up that there is nothing bad, nothing unworkable. Because all of the ravages of your mind are like the most perfect training ground for you to start detaching from all that self-related clinging and self-cherishing. So there's actually there's nothing that we need to kind of push away, but we still want to be, again, I love this idea of like polishing our inner lens so we can see more clearly who we are, what we are. And what we clearly are is a reflection of this fundamental goodness. And that idea is that all of us have Buddha nature. We all have the very seeds of awakening within us. And when we understand that for ourselves, and that's the beautiful bridge with joyful pride, when we have that sense of, I'm already good, it makes us clearly see you're already good too, right? There's the both and, because my already good isn't something I earned or did. It's just because I am. So are you, right? There's a beautiful kind of symmetry in that sense of confidence that's built on a fundamental knowing that we all are these radiant lights, even if we get dimmed or obscured or confused or diluted for lifetimes. Hopefully not. Does that help, Madeline? Does that?
Yeah, one quick
Madeline
clarifying
does.
question. If I murdered somebody on my way to Sangha tonight, am
Oh,
I
no.
still, I just want to know, am I still, I think I might still be basically good, but what I'm failing to do is to connect with my basic goodness, which is manifesting in the act of murdering somebody. Could that be true that I'm still
Yeah.
basically good, but I just
There's,
can't seem to connect with my sense of basic goodness, which is why it's
yes.
manifesting as the desire to murder or something?
Yeah, and it's not, yes, and one, the basic goodness never goes away. It's described as unstainable unstained, which is kind of like a weird connotation, the stain, but it's primordially pure. You can't touch it. It's so deep in there. However, yes, we lose touch with it, and also we get trapped by delusion, right? By not seeing things clearly. That person's bad. Oh my God, they're aggressively, I need to get them, right? And then the delusion that they're separate from us, different from us. So we have to work through the delusion or ignorance, sometimes called ignorance, but that has a heavy connotation. And so many evenings here together, we're really working with the words, because the words sit with us in such a specific way, and words create spells, right? Words create understanding. So it's important for the words to feel right. And so what was your new agey one? Our basic, what was it? Energetic goodness, or we can totally do that, and if that lands better, no problem. Because it's true, good and bad is a pretty binary feel. And what I remember is that beautiful story you told about empathetic joy when you were walking here and you saw these like two toddlers reuniting, and both of them were jumping up and down laughing, and you jumped up and down laughing just to see what it was like. And that's when we're so present with the world and the goodness of the world and like the manifestations of goodness, it increases our ability to receive and reflect that goodness too. So there's like just this, what is called in psychology an upward spiral of goodness, seeing goodness, feeling goodness, then recognizing more goodness. And then, so it can really have that, you were asking about the behavioral, it can really have a behavioral impact, meaning it starts to manifest in how we act too. So I'll never forget that story. That was so awesome. I can totally see it.
Thank you.
Better
That makes it, yeah.
than aggression on the way to the Dharma. Let's
Sometimes
have
on
more.
the way here, I jump for joy, and other times I murder people. Anything can happen. You never know.
You're a complex being. I respect that.
Complex. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, Ace. I don't know. I think the microphone's right.
Hi, so I just have a question on this too. I think a few years ago, I was very much, relating to people just from their basic goodness, just seeing their basic goodness and loving it and being all about it. And then I've gotten hurt by some people.
Yeah.
And I think that me focusing so much on that almost led to me overly empathizing with others and not protecting myself, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And now I feel a little jaded. And I'm like, I don't want to be jaded.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think about how to look at this in a different way of because how do you have boundaries while also recognizing basic goodness in others?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Kind
Oh,
tying it
100%.
all together.
Who relates to that statement? Yeah. And that is, it's this kind of funny and beautiful thing of the path is when we really start to recognize the indivisibility of ourself and all other beings, and to see ourselves and all other beings as connected and beautiful. We also really, as you mentioned, we have to strengthen our boundaries unbelievably. And I would say that that's the quality of discernment, right? And a lot of the ways our boundaries get over trampled over or run over doesn't actually have to do with our compassion, and our ability to see the basic goodness in others. It has to do with our historic patterns, right, in our families of origin. So I keep threatening, and it will happen at some point, to do this half day on the Dharma and codependence, because 2 hands up, yes, right? There's so much confusion sometimes in how we are showing up in a compassionate way, and then how we're showing up in this habitual, familiar way that's actually rooted in fear and over-accommodation. And it takes just this discernment, and I go back like this, because we lose ourselves, we lean over forward towards another, right, in wanting to see their goodness and to help them, but actually our appropriate place is here, like in our own dignity. And then also, you know, that joyful pride of like, I already know what I need is right here, and I'm here for you, but I don't need you, your approval, you being okay, you being good, for me to be okay. So actually strengthening our own basic goodness is like one of the most powerful tools for then establishing the clarity of the boundaries with others. Yeah. Does that make sense?
That does make sense,
Oh,
thank
good.
you.
So thank God you're here. And, you know, and it's so hard, like that, like leaning back into our own self. You know, it's, especially for those of us who this is our, you know, habitual pattern, is that, you know, defaulting to attending towards the other, it can take quite a while to change the shape and route of the river. So, yeah, thank you. Yes.
Just following on that, I think you can also end up being a more supportive person and a more empathetic person if you are able to stay in yourself and not take on the pain. I mean, you can feel the pain, you can feel the joy, you can celebrate or cry with somebody, but if you can be strong in yourself, you
Yeah.
can actually end up being a more supportive person
Yeah.
and helpful person.
Yes.
And you can also protect yourself.
Beautiful. Yes. And your name?
Emily.
Hi, Emily. Great.
Hello.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, that is, it's really funny again, because this path of the Bodhisattva and the training that's described in this 8th century text, it can feel very like, well, I'm doing all this stuff for me, but I thought this is all about everybody else. But you described it beautifully, like our ability to show up in a sustained, open, supportive way to others, like over and over and over. We have to kind of recommit, you know, to seeing where we fall into the same habits and pattern of self-cherishing, self-clinging. And this idea of self-cherishing, self-clinging can sound like we think we're so great, but it's also we think we're so bad, right? So in any way that we're falling into that separateness, yeah, and yet kind of coming back and tending to our own garden first. Thank you so much. Any other reflection? Yes, Jimmy. We should get one of those mics you can throw. Maybe then.
Thank you, Ron. I just wanted to say that, well, a couple of things. First off, Maddie is my pole star for basic goodness all the time. She's like
She's loving that.
my dear friend.
Yeah.
But I unfortunately grew up in this tradition that was about one's basic sinfulness.
Yeah.
And it was drilled into me. On the other hand, I was fortunate to have next door neighbors who were this older couple who were like covert bodhisattvas, Lou and Seal Kipperman, who were like the closest things to grandparents that I had. And I've shared this before, that these were people who loved me and showed that love to me absolutely unconditionally. I didn't have to be a good boy. I didn't have to be doing good in school. I didn't have to be behaving well. They just gave that to me. And it was really in some ways in direct opposition to a lot of the stuff that I was growing up with in my family of origin and in the tradition in which I was being raised. However, that feeling that I had from them was so strong and felt so much more fundamentally genuine than a lot of the other crap that I was putting up with, that it stayed with me. And I first started to experience that literally when I was like 4 and 5 years old from these two folks.
Beautiful.
And it built and it sustained me, really. And it's something that I can go back to, you know,
Beautiful.
decades later.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. And I've heard you talk about these beings before, and it's such a description of the benefactor practice too, of remembering the people who are able to reflect to us our basic goodness and kind of cherishing really that and what they're able to bring forth. And it's so sweet to really remember the goodness that has surrounded us, because obviously sometimes it hasn't, right? So the both and. Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to actually do a little bit from the book. That's why it's taking so long. It's so rich to hear from people. I wanted to read this couple paragraphs from Pema Chödrön, but I'll first read the stanzas here. And this is kind of how do we meet the world with this joyful pride, and that we use this joyful pride to undermine whatever is in the way. And so often what's in the way, as described in this text, are kleshas, or these defiled mind states, or kind of emotions. So Shantideva here, these are his stanzas. When you are beleaguered by defilements, fight them in 1,000 ways. Do not surrender to host the afflictions. Be like a lion in a crowd of foxes. However great may be their peril, people will by reflex guard their eyes, and I likewise, regardless of all hardship, must not fall beneath defilement's power. And then we get to the drama side. So some of you know, and if you haven't heard the Shantideva verses, he likes to use a lot of drama to get us clear on the hazards of defilements. Again, we're talking about here anger, ignorance, craving, when our mind is overwhelmed by delusion. He says, even though I may be burned to death, though I may be killed, my head cut off, at no time will I bow and scrape before that foe of mine, defiled emotions. So he's saying it's so important that we not let these difficult emotions run away with our mind. We could, even if we were being burned to death. Thus, in every time and place, I will not wander from the wholesome path. So this, idea that our joyful pride, our sense of confidence in our own goodness, it can help us meet even the most difficult and deluded of moments that we have. And then Pema Chödrön gives a very kind of practical way of how do we do this? She says, in my own training, I've been taught to look for the gaps, the gap at the end of each out-breath, the space between thoughts, an unexpected noise like we just had, a moment of awe, that we can create these gaps just by pausing and looking around. And her teacher, Chogyam Trungpa, says he calls this poking holes in the clouds. So the cloud might be, we're distracted by this thing I need or want or have to do, and then we look for the gap and we see there's something there that's kind of already good. She says, these fleeting moments of no big deal me, no internal conversation, no frozen opinion, are very simple, but very powerful. The utter freshness of just being present introduces us to an unshakable confidence, a lion-like pride that refuses to buy into any negative or limiting storylines. This is the Shantideva spirit. So this idea that we can, in our everyday experience, kind of touch into these moments, this no big deal, me, this sense of that freshness, right? And I brought this up before, but it's so interesting in how a lot of the contemporary neuroscience and theory of neuroscience, we are calling the mind a kind of predictive mind. And this idea that the way the mind works is constantly generating predictions about what will happen next, as opposed to experiencing the world as it arises. And in this predictive way that the mind is operating, it's, mindfulness is like an exact opposition to that. Because even if we've seen it 10,000 times, I definitely used predictive mind when I walked in tonight. I didn't check out, are still the plants there? Is the Buddha still there? I know where I'm gonna go, it's my seat, I sit here, right? We just kind of default, no problem, right? It's actually kind of challenging at all times to be aware of everything. But we can deliberately choose, let's say we decide to do this for, we have a walk from our home to wherever it is we need to go to work or to a friend's house, and we decide, I'm going to cut through this predictive theory creating mode of mind and thinking. I'm going to receive everything freshly. And we kind of cultivate that freshness and that newness. And then we, just like, Raph was describing, like we experience, sun, warmth, tree, and we almost forget who we are. The no big deal me gets like such a no big deal that we're like no one. And it's such a sweet practice because we are constantly recreating, re-energizing this identity, this what is sometimes described as our internal working model of ourself. And that internal working model of ourself is kind of how we want to be seen by the world, how we continue to repopulate ourselves over and over. I'm this person and I do these things and this is how I'm known. And that's very functional when we show up to our work and or with people we care about. But can we take a break sometime and apply that same kind of freshness that we might when we're walking down the street to just us, just that simple, unelaborated, unadorned, no big deal me. It's quite a relief. It would be amazing if we could apply that right in the middle of one of our kleshas, like right when we are like, what the is wrong with our government? Like, when is this going to end? Whatever that whole thing that might have been happening to anyone recently, I've heard. It's so hard. And then could we in that moment just be like, I'm going to return and refresh to just this simple essence, no big deal me. And likely, we don't need to be super directive, but likely what we'll find is a hint or trace of that basic goodness that's right there too. I like these next little stanzas here. Like those who take great pleasure in their games, the Bodhisattva in their every deed will feel the greatest joy, exhilaration, pleasure that will never fade or pass. People labor hard to gain contentment, though success is very far from sure. But how can they be happy if they do not labor? Those whose joys in the work itself. So this idea that the joy is kind of it's the path, right? The joy isn't in the fleeting enjoyment of a game. So like those who take great pleasure in their games, I attributed that with like those of us who take great pleasure in our surfing. And the Bodhisattva in their every deed will feel the greatest joy and exhilaration. So it's one thing to have an enjoyment of a temporary pleasure and another to have an enjoyment for being on this path with great enthusiasm. And, this idea that our qualities of joyful enthusiasm include such dedication to our aspiration, this quality of steadfastness, like we are committed to it, joy. And then there's this last piece, which I've also heard is helpful, but I myself, this is an area I really need to be vigilant very frequently on, which is moderation, knowing when is enough, right? So the Bodhisattva really has to have all of these qualities in order to have that wind of joyful enthusiasm in their sails, the aspiration, the steadfastness, the joy, and the moderation. So the moderation is, if I am impaired by weakness or fatigue, I'll lay the work aside, the better to resume, and I will leave tasks completed, anticipating the work yet to come. Pema Chödrön says that the importance here is being shown for moderation and rest. Before making commitments, we have to consider our capabilities and learn to pace ourselves. When sentient beings habitually drive ourselves or flop, or both, when we sentient beings habitually drive ourselves or flop, both of which lead to burnout. The key to remaining eager and inspired on the Bodhisattva path is knowing when to take a break. On this wise and compassionate note, Shantideva ends his presentation on the aspiration, firmness, joy, and moderation. And, I think it all circles back in a way to basic goodness, because a lot of over-striving, overdoing, overcommitment, it's like a desire to be loved and valued from the outside for what we do. And in that same way, like, Ace was asking, like, how do we know when we can safely and effectively be present and loving to another? It's like we can't do that unless we can be more instantiated in our own love right here. Similarly, how can we know how much is enough to commit to projects and ideas and ventures, even if they're all like, I think some of us in this room, when you're on a path and you end up getting caught up in a lot of really meaningful ventures and activities, it's like, oh, but these are all good things that help people. That can still lead to that kind of excess. And that joyful enthusiasm for practice doesn't happen when we feel overcommitted and exhausted, when there's too much. So I appreciate that piece there. And then I just want to read this last stanza here. So the power of joy, this is by Pema here. Along with aspiration and steadfastness, joy is a key ingredient for enthusiasm. It's like when we do something we really love, we're all in. But when we do something we don't enjoy, we drag our feet. But when we do something we love, like let's go swimming, let's eat popcorn and watch videos, it makes us feel happy and light. Can we bring this same enthusiasm to freeing ourselves from pain? Could we approach awakening from self-absorption with like the joy we have for our activities in everyday life? And then with this kind of enthusiasm for challenge, life becomes a constant source of happiness. The greater the challenge, the better, is the Bodhisattva's motto. The love of challenge is the Bodhisattva's secret weapon. I love that. So again, kind of, as Madeline was saying earlier, I don't like the good bad. And with the Bodhisattva, there's not really a good bad, the secret weapon of loving the challenge being our difficult family member, our demanding boss, our uncertain future with our job, our work, democracy. We love this challenge, secret weapon, right? This is all fuel and food for the path. So with that, let's take a moment to come back to our breath and body. For a moment, seeing if you can touch that inner ember or spark of basic goodness. And feel and find this natural lightness, this wind, this joyful enthusiasm. Knowing the goodness, of course, I want to generate, share this goodness with others. And considering the goodness we may have gathered together here tonight. And on this beautiful, auspicious full moon day, it's a beautiful and auspicious day on the Tibetan Buddhist calendar. And whether or not that resonates for you, we can collectively consider the possibility that our time here together has some momentum and energy, heightened by this moon, by this celebration. And if it feels comfortable, placing hands together in front of the chest. In this symbolic offering up all this auspicious time and energy, the reflections, the connection, the practice. Dedicating this for all beings everywhere. May all beings everywhere experience a sense of peace and ease. May all beings everywhere who are facing uncertainty, loneliness, and pain Feel freed from inner and outer harms. May all beings everywhere know their true source of happiness, belonging, connection. May all beings everywhere who suffer from delusion, craving, and ill will be freed. May all beings everywhere of all times be completely and beautifully freed in their heart, body, and mind. Thank you for your practice. Super lovely to be here with you all.